Welcome back to Talent Hub Talk. So if you heard our last episode, you'll know I reviewed the candidate side of our 2024 ANZ Salesforce market survey. This time round, I'm going to be reviewing some of the highlights from manager or hiring manager side of the survey. I recommend getting a copy if you haven't already. It's on. You can download it from our website, and there's going to be lots of things in here that I don't cover today that I think you will find valuable. So yeah, make sure you have a copy as well as listening to this episode. I'm going to go through live and pick out some things that jump out to me. If I miss anything that you find interesting that you'd like to discuss, please reach out. Always keen to hear from you and have a chat. But yeah, just going to go through and pick out some highlights now. So Salesforce talent is in short supply is the first page, the first titled page. What do Salesforce managers see as the biggest challenge to their team's growth for the next 12 months? Interesting, attracting experienced talent, 22% of respondents said this, and then also 20% said retention of current team. So hiring and retaining talent is still a massive challenge for hiring managers, even though a lot of people would have you believe that the market's soft and easy to find top Salesforce talent and also to retain, and that definitely isn't the case. Only 8% of people said their biggest challenge this year will be economic factors, which was actually less than 11% said improving the company brand and the Salesforce ecosystem was going to be a bigger challenge for them than economic factors. So hopefully we're coming out the worst of things. I'm not an economist. I can't say that for sure. I would just like to think that is the case. But yeah, it's interesting that hiring managers are more concerned about attracting and retaining talent. 84% of Salesforce hiring managers find it challenging to find and hire Salesforce talent. Last year, only 81% of people said that they were finding it challenging. So it's got tougher in the eyes of hiring managers, again, which isn't necessarily the perception that a lot of people would have in the market. All of the consulting managers that we surveyed did hire in some capacity in 2023, 2024, and 84% of the end user hiring managers that we surveyed did make hires within that period. So yeah, the market's been active. There have been maybe not the volume of requirements that we've seen, but there's definitely been activity in the market. 44% of consulting managers surveyed said that they found salary expectations to be their biggest challenge, whereas last year the lack of suitable candidates was a bigger challenge for them. This year, so the salary expectations in the market are a massive challenge for consulting managers. End user managers said that their biggest challenge has been the lack of suitable candidates. So whereas that's what consulting partners said last year, it's been the biggest challenge this year. And 31% said that expectations around salaries are higher than their budget. So yeah, we're seeing some trends in terms of what people have had as challenges over the last 12 months. Across the board, hiring managers in consulting firms, end users, not-for-profits, and so on told us that the Salesforce developer role is the hardest role for them to fill in 2024, and that's consistent with what we heard last year as well. 19% of consulting practices said that the technical architect role is the hardest to fill, and they're also finding it challenging to find Salesforce industries expertise in the market, which is something I've commented on before. Definitely a shortage of industry skills when things really start to ramp up in that space. 36% of Salesforce managers said that they'd experienced a role being unfilled for over 3 months due to a lack of available talent. This has risen by 4% since last year. So last year, 32% said they'd had a role open for over 3 months. That's not necessarily in the last 12 months. They've had that role open for over 3 months, but they have at some point had a role that they've struggled to fill for more than 3 months. 76% of Salesforce managers anticipate hiring into their teams in the next 12 months. Last year, 81% of people said that. So it's slightly disappointing to hear there has been a bit of a drop, but it's still good to see good numbers expect to be hiring in the next 12 months. All of the consulting practices that we surveyed expect to hire in some capacity in 2024. Which is great. I think when we really see consulting partners start to ramp up the volume of hiring, it's only a good thing for the market. It's not necessarily good for the companies the consulting firms are taking people from, but it's good for job seekers because once the hiring partners start ramping up, that means that end users are potentially losing staff, which means that, and obviously other consulting firms are losing staff, which means that people, the volume kind of spreads out and everyone needs to kind of backfill, and it's just good for job seekers overall. 81% of consulting managers do hire Salesforce contractors in their teams, although 69% said that they'd prefer not to if they had the option. Overall, when considering Salesforce professionals, Salesforce managers, overall they ranked culture fit as the most important factor when making hiring decisions, and specific industry or domain experience as being the least important factor. This surprises me because I think with the increase in Salesforce industries and the push for Salesforce to go down the industries route, I think that's a way of getting more talent into the market by hiring people with deep domain experience. So yeah, I mean, based on the conversations I have, I know culture fit is important, but I often feel that hiring managers are putting other factors above culture fit. And definitely through the crazy years of COVID when everyone was kind of hiring, and I definitely think culture fit slipped down the ranking. Maybe that's now more important to people when they're trying to fix some of the culture challenges that have been brought on through some of those hiring practices of years gone by. 53% of Salesforce managers within end user companies said that they do not hire candidates from a non-Salesforce background in their Salesforce team. I think, unfortunately, I understand why. They don't necessarily have the internal capacity or capabilities to train someone from scratch. I think sometimes when they're hiring externally, they won't necessarily look for someone from a non-Salesforce background. But when they're promoting or hiring from within the business, often they do hire someone from a non-Salesforce background and give them the ability to learn Salesforce. And this is because they have the knowledge of the company already. So they don't have to learn the company's industry or domain, and they just have to learn Salesforce. So sometimes it's easier to hire from internal than hire external if you're hiring for someone with non-Salesforce experience. 47% of end user managers have to pay more to attract Salesforce professionals to their organization when compared to similar skill sets. Last year, 76% said that. So I'm not sure if Salesforce salaries have dropped. I don't think they have. I think they've stabilized, and maybe other salaries have come up. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly why there's been such a drop in that space, because I definitely don't think salaries have gone backwards. I just think they've kind of maybe remained the same. 63% of Salesforce consulting managers feel that Salesforce salaries are not value for money when compared to other skill sets. Last year, 71% of people said that in the consulting space. So maybe Salesforce salaries are looking better value for money this year to consulting managers than previous years. 39% of Salesforce managers feel that they have a good reputation in the Salesforce ecosystem, whereas 43% admitted that they're unsure of their company's reputation. I would say when I'm speaking to a lot of companies, they're really not that sure of how they're perceived by Salesforce professionals. I try to educate a lot of companies on why that's important and why that may be impacting their ability to hire. The most common number of stages in the Salesforce interview process is 2 stages. 45% of Salesforce managers said that they conduct 2 interviews. 8% of companies have 1-stage interview process, and 2% have 4 or more stages. So I definitely think, if you've got 4 or more stages, you really need to think about how that's perceived by candidates and the potential of missing out on candidates through that interview process. I'm not saying everyone should do a 1-stage interview process, but I do know it works for some companies. But 2 does seem to be about right and what I would kind of recommend for most companies. 53% of Salesforce managers commented that less than 1 out of 4 of job applicants typically match the job required. So less than 25% of candidates that are applying for a job are actually right for that job, which kind of aligns to what I see when I put an advert on one of the job boards. How projects are delivered. So most end user organizations typically deliver Salesforce projects with a mix of an in-house team, partners, and contractors. 58% of end users organizations typically deliver Salesforce projects with the support of a Salesforce partner, which was 64% last year. Maybe we're seeing more companies doing projects in-house and building internal capability, which has definitely been a trend over the last few years. 53% of end users that replied to the survey do hire contractors to support their in-house team, some more than others. I think we see a lot of that in the government space, a lot in financial services, telcos. A lot of the bigger companies will ramp up with contractors, and typically smaller companies might not do that as much. 32% of end user managers have had to delay or cancel projects due to a lack of available Salesforce talent in the market in the last 12 months, which is actually a drop off from last year. 36% had the same issue last year. So it's good that less managers have had to cancel projects, but it's also disappointing to know that projects have had to be cancelled when just because of a lack of available talent in the market. Turnover's pretty consistent to be expected in the Salesforce ecosystem. I think most companies, that's a challenge for a lot of companies, is retaining talent. 58% of end user managers have experienced turnover within their teams in the last 12 months. 56% of consulting managers said the same, which, so it's surprising. Is it surprising? I'm not sure. Maybe over the last year, it's probably less people moving jobs. Through COVID, I think, you would probably see a much higher number of companies losing staff, moving between companies. 16% of Salesforce managers have made a counteroffer to resigning team members in the last 12 months. And actually 31% of consulting managers have had to do that. So it's interesting to know that consulting partners are having to pay and counteroffer staff more than end users. I'm not sure why that's necessarily the case. Maybe just bigger teams, more people potentially leaving, therefore. And I think obviously if a consulting partner has someone on a project, they're definitely not keen to lose them and lose that resource for that particular project. So it would make sense for them to counteroffer to try and at least keep someone through the duration of a project. The average utilization rate for team members has been 51 to 70%, and for 51% of consulting practices. I think over the last couple of years, it would have been a lot higher than 51 to 70% for utilization. Over half of consulting practices have lost out on potential projects due to a lack of available resources in their team this year, which is, it's huge. I know a lot of the partners out there would have liked additional revenue over the last year. So to lose out on projects just because you don't have the right people is disappointing. 16% of end user organizations have made people redundant in the last year. And unfortunately, 25% of consulting practices have needed to, which, very, very disappointing. Hopefully, like I said, either in this survey or the previous podcast, hopefully we're coming out the worst of that and into better days now. 99% of Salesforce managers reported having a preference for some degree of ongoing remote working modeling. If you're in the 1%, I think you definitely, unless there's a absolute reason for needing your staff to be in the office, I definitely think you need to consider that because it's very hard. 5 days a week in the office definitely isn't something that candidates en masse want to be doing right now. So we need to kind of have a consideration around why and what can be done to kind of change your business approach, or unless, like I said, it's a requirement that's actually needed for any particular reason. 3 days per week working from the office is now the ideal balance based on 34% of respondents for the manager surveys. And 26% said 2 days per week in the office is their preference. So if you're in the 1% of wanting people in the office 5 days a week, there's other managers out there that are offering a lot more flexibility for talent. So that's something you really need to consider. 41% of end user managers are planning to add more Salesforce products to their existing suite this year, which is great to see. Hopefully, we'll see more and more requirements coming off the back of these new products being implemented. 25% of consulting managers claim to have Salesforce Cloud/product specialists within their team, whereas 56% hire only cross-cloud talent and will continue to hire cross-cloud talent rather than specialist consultants. Depends on the consultancy that we speak to. I think that's kind of aligns to the outcome of the survey. Some go very deep into certain industries or domains or products, whereas others are a lot more cross-cloud. So that's I think kind of what I would expect to see as well. And only 19% expect to hire specialists in favor of Salesforce generalists in the future. So it goes to show that having a broad skill set across products is still the preferred and probably the most beneficial skill sets or knowledge to have in terms of being able to secure opportunities. Most organizations that we surveyed are poised to adopt and leverage AI, with 53% either somewhat or very ready. 55% of Salesforce managers said that moderate changes to the way Salesforce professionals work in the next 5 years are expected off the back of AI. And 21% believe that there will be a major transformation of roles in the next 5 years. 73% believe that it will be mainly positive change, which is good. I'll take their word for it. Hopefully that is the case. And only 3% believe that AI will negatively impact roles in the Salesforce community. So, hopefully everyone that's in that 3% is wrong. But let's see how things pan out. 82% of Salesforce managers said that their business doesn't award salary increases based on additional Salesforce certifications. I think a lot of the end user companies that we see probably don't. A lot of the partners do. I think a lot of Salesforce professionals expect to be rewarded in some way, shape or form for certification. So there's a bit of a mismatch there. 94% of consulting practice Salesforce managers are not confident there is enough available Salesforce talent in ANZ to meet their Salesforce hiring needs over the next 12 months. Last year, 79% had this concern. So goes to show that companies are looking and expecting growth and worried about what's available in the market, which, it's I guess for me as a recruiter, that's a good place to be. But hopefully we do see an increase in volume of opportunities and a lot more opportunities out there for people at different levels as well in the ecosystem. So 8% of respondents said that the market is candidate short, whereas 58% said the market is quality short, 26% said experience short. Only 8% of Salesforce managers feel there is a good balance of experience, quality, and candidates in the market. 47% of end user managers feel that they've achieved a positive return on their Salesforce investment. Unfortunately, this is down. 64% felt they'd received a positive return on investment, and 21% are currently unsure whether or not they've received a positive return on their investment. We've also got at the end of the survey lots of comments from people in the ecosystem, so both on the general market as well as what people think of AI. I'm not going to go through all of those, but like I said before at the beginning of the podcast, I really recommend downloading a copy of this and going through it, because I'm sure there's plenty that I've missed, unfortunately, or things that may jump out to you that haven't necessarily jumped out to me through my inspection. But hopefully there's some interesting stats that I've covered today. As always, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to answer any questions you have. We'll be next up working on the next round of our salary survey. And then obviously this time next year, we'll be releasing another copy of our market survey. So it's interesting to see what changes year on year. Hopefully you're getting some value from the surveys that we're releasing. Hopefully you're enjoying the podcast. Please do subscribe for future episodes that are coming through.